All right, I see a lot of chatter and activity in the chat window. So obviously you all are very engaged, but I definitely want you to have all eyes on this next person. As I queue up the bio, I want to welcome our keynote speaker for this morning. Luisa Montalvo was born and raised in South Texas. She later moved to Austin, Texas, where she worked at Abbott Laboratories for 25 years. She retired at the age of 53 and has been busy rescuing homeless dogs and cats and driving them to the East Coast for the past 8 years. She has fostered and cared for over 1,000 homeless dogs. It's amazing. She first joined Toastmasters in 1989 for 3 years when she worked at Abbott Laboratories. She then rejoined in 2013 and has been a member ever since. In 2019, she competed in the International Speech Contest against 33,000 contestants from 143 countries and placed second. But she wasn't done because this August, she competed once again at the Toastmasters International World Championship of Public Speaking against 30,000 participants from over 150 countries. And guess what? She placed first in the world. She is the first female to return to win first place and the first Hispanic to win the title. Everyone, please welcome, give a round of applause or applause emojis for our keynote speaker, the 2024 World Champion Public Speaking, Luisa Montalvo, giving her speech, I've Got to Be Me. I've Got to Be Me, Luisa Montalvo.
Thank you so much. Am I audible?
Yes.
I've got to be me. I've got to. Oh, wait a minute. I want a speech contest, not a singing contest. Good point. I hear you. Don't come at me. I've been invited to speak to you today about authenticity intelligence or authentic intelligence. And I'm so glad it wasn't about artificial intelligence, because since I've retired, the only really interaction I've had has been with dogs, and sometimes they're more intelligent than I am. So I'm here to tell you about authenticity. I think one of the beauties of being able to compete with Toastmasters is back in 2019, when I got on stage for the first time at the finals in Denver, Colorado, the feedback from everyone was I kept hearing the same word over and over. Luisa, you're authentic. You're authentic. And I kind of knew what the word was, but I'm not going to lie. I went back to Webster's dictionary and looked it up and realized, yes, it's being you. So how can you be you? Now, I'm glad I wasn't asked to speak about artificial intelligence because I know nothing of that. And to me, it's even a little frightening. But then you know what? Emails, when they first came out, that was frightening to me. So we all adjust, we all adapt, and we move on. I believe the beautiful thing about authentic intelligence is to use it in the best capacity we have. Now, what I've done is I've gone and put together a way to write a speech. And to be authentic, I'm going to share with you these steps in writing a speech. Whether you've joined Toastmasters to become a leader, which is a great place to start, whether you've joined Toastmasters to be able to not have a fear of public speaking, or whether you've joined Toastmasters just to compete, I'm going to share some tips with you on how to write a speech. And if you're able to use these tips, guaranteed you will be shining in your true, authentic self. Tip number one, and there's 18 steps. We're going to go through them nice and quickly here. Take what you can, take what you like, put away the rest, doesn't matter. But number one, right even before you start to write a speech or compete in a contest, you have to ask yourself one question. Most important thing, why are you doing this? Why are you writing a speech? Why are you competing? You have to ask yourself that, because when it comes to the part where maybe your decision to do this is more difficult than what you thought it would be, you're going to have to revisit this question. Why are you doing it? So let's start with tip number 1. Is your speech going to be relatable to your entire audience? If you're going to teach people how to change spark plugs on a 2000 Toyota Camry, you might have limited your audience interest, because not everybody, one, wants to get their hands dirty, cares about spark plugs, doesn't have a Toyota Camry. So it's got to be a universal message that everyone will be able to take away something from. And that's how you make an impact. Make it about, I'm just going to throw this out there, racism, possibly cancer, because we do know, just as our person was talking about the 4 types of cancer she survived. That's amazing. We all know probably someone that's been through cancer or some kind of illness. So we want to talk about that. We want to talk about resiliency. We want to talk about effort. We want to talk about courage, something that the entire audience can relate to. Now, if you're like me, I remember when I was a kid, for step number 2, it's actually sitting down and writing a speech. You know, I would just get ready to start cleaning my room, and my mom would walk in and say, Luisa, you need to clean this room. Well, now that somebody told me that I need to do it, guess what? Now I don't want to do it. I mean, I was going to do it earlier, but for some reason, when somebody tells us you have to have that project done by today, you're like, well, now I don't want to do it, because we don't like being told what to do, or at least I don't. So how do you write a speech? How do you get ideas? What you do, or what I do, is I grab my phone. And on my phone, I've got a little button that says voice memos. And I'll stop and think, or I'll be driving and something will happen. Some guy will cut me off in traffic and I'll get upset. And then I'll say, okay, Luisa, why are you upset? Is there a real reason to be upset? And I'm thinking, hey, I bet I'm not the only one that this has happened to. So I'll grab my phone and I'll say, I want to give a speech about the guy that cut me off in traffic. I was not happy. And how was I able to turn that around? You hit end of record, put the phone down, don't worry about it. But now you've kind of got an idea of what you want to speak about. So maybe you're washing dishes or you're watching a movie or something, and you're like, oh, you know what? This was just like the time that this and this and this happened. Grab your phone again, hit the voice recording. Oh, okay, I need to mention the part about this and this and that relates to the guy cutting me off and my temper. Put the phone down. Through the whole week, this is now implanted in your mind, your authentic little self, and you're thinking, what else has happened about this whole thing that I can talk about? Every time you come up with an idea, grab your phone, hit the voice memo, make a little 20, 30-second recording and put it down. At the end of the week, you now have maybe 5, 6, 7 recordings about this one topic. So this is where you get your outline. Okay, you're thinking, that number 3, maybe I shouldn't mention that. Scratch it out and go ahead and whittle it down to 4 or 5 different things. You start making a speech. You've got a 15-minute speech. You need to whittle that down to 10. And then you need to whittle that down to possibly 6 minutes. And I'll tell you why. For those of you that don't know, a few months ago in Anaheim, when I was competing against 7 other contestants in the finals, did you know 3 people were disqualified? 2 of them spoke for 7 minutes and 32 seconds. So they have gone and worked on this project, on this contest, on their speech for almost a year. They make it to the finals. And because they went over time by 2 seconds, they were disqualified. The third person was disqualified because she sang a song but failed to cite her source or who wrote the song. And so she was disqualified. So very important on the timing. You take that idea, you write your outline, you go ahead and whittle it down, and hopefully you get it down to 6 minutes, and then you're good. Because if you have humor, and we'll talk about that in a minute, you're going to have to allow for the humor. which is why those two people were disqualified. The audience kept laughing, and there's no way for you to say, be quiet. So here we go. Next step. Number 3, a personal story. This is one of the most important things because we as listeners, as the audience, we love a story, a personal story. It's almost like we're kids and mom's putting us in bed and tucking us in, and she's going to give us a story or read us a story. We as the audience want to hear a personal story and how this affected you. To me, if you go with a speech and the speech has no personal story, then it's basically a report because all you're doing is giving us facts. Throw in a personal story, even on those business meetings, throw in a little personal story. That way you engage your audience and now they're wanting to listen to you. Number 4, I love this one. Interject appropriate humor, or like I did this year, possibly inappropriate humor, but not too much. You don't want it to overcome the whole speech. I presented my final speech to quite a few clubs because I wanted to get their reaction when I mentioned my God. And for those of you that haven't heard my speech, lucky you. But anyway, for those of you that haven't heard my speech, in the very beginning, I talk about my God. And I say my God because I don't want to offend some of you. I want to offend all of you. You see, that to me is humor, but it also allowed me to say what I was going to say with permission from the audience. So you want to put in appropriate humor if you feel you need to. However, don't let it overcome the speech unless it's a humorous contest. Number 5, I love this one. And this is kind of the one that I'm trying to have people understand. And it's have the intro relate to the ending. If you start out with a joke, possibly end with a joke, because that way you're telling the audience, hey, I finished my speech. You don't have to say in conclusion or, well, wrapping it up. You don't have to say that. If you start and end your speech the same way, you're telling the audience, this is what I do. This is how I'm doing it. And the audience is able to relate to that. Now, similar attention-grabbing intro. Patricia Fripp, who is a well-known speaker, tells me that if you don't say something in the first 30 seconds to grab your audience's attention, chances are they're not going to listen. And you want to make it something that people are going to see and say, that was different. I've never seen that. In my final speech, I start not even looking at the audience. My hair is covering my face. You're supposed to think that it's not even me speaking. To me, that's an introduction that grabbed the entire audience. Why? Because I don't think anybody's ever done that. It's going out on a limb. It's being different. It's being authentic and true to yourself. I'm not sure if you're aware, but back in 1975, when people were competing, did you know that they wouldn't even leave the lectern? They stayed behind the lectern the entire speech until somebody who is true and authentic to themselves came away from the lectern, went and started moving around the stage, and now you don't see a single speaker stay behind the lectern or the podium. And that, to me, is going above and beyond, thinking outside the box, however, still being true to yourself and making something work. So be authentic in that. Number 7, no bland topics. But if it's something that everyone talks about all the time, make it unique and interesting. Back in 2019, I talked about probably one of the oldest topics, and that was racism. However, when I spoke about racism, did I attack the audience and say, all of you are racists? No, I said, and I told the audience, I'm a racist. I wasn't a racist against another culture or another person. I was a racist against my own race. And to me, that self-deprecation was able to allow the audience to accept that I was talking about racism. I put myself on the chopping block. I said, I'm the one that made the mistake. I'm a racist. And when you do that, the audience is more willing to accept what you're going to say because you're not attacking the audience. You're being vulnerable and you're being truthful and you're saying, this is what I did. So remember that. Number 8, slightly push the level of uncomfortable statements. When I talked about my God, I had someone that analyzed my speech and he said, you know, Luisa could have gone up there and said, oh, I'm in heaven and I see God and I see Buddha and I see Krishna. Oh, and for all those people that don't believe in God, you know, there was no God. The thing is, what he said resonated with me. And it's, if you try to make your speech for everyone, you make your speech for no one. So I really like that. So if you use uncomfortable statements with a bit of truth and your authenticity, you can't go wrong. I love that one. Number 9 is, and I didn't know this until about a few years, it's called the theory of 3, which if you're going to present something, you might want to use 3 examples of it. Not 2, not 4, but 3. When I did my semifinal speech this year, I talked about my band director in 6th grade telling me that I could never play the drums. Then I realized at the age of 64, 50 years later, that I could play the drums. But when somebody tells you something growing up as a child, that kind of stays in your mentality and you accept it and you never challenge it. When I brought this up in my speech, I gave 3 examples. I said, 1, the doctors told me I would probably never walk again. And while I presented the speech, I was holding on to a chair in front of me. I pushed the chair out of the way. I took 3 steps and I said, really? Watch me. The second thing I said was, people think I can't shatter glass ceilings. Really? Watch me. And the third one was, my best friend says I can't cook. Really? No, she's right. I can't cook. But it was the power of 3. I mentioned 3 different things. And when you do that, it resonates more with the audience and it resonates and holds better value in your speech. So that's the power of 3 if you're going to use the power of 3. Number 10 is the one we like to do. And sometimes we overemphasize it too much, but it's a call to the action from the audience. You're saying, okay, I did this. Can you help me do this also? And it's asking the audience to get involved. And when you ask your audience to get involved, that makes it personal. Most of the time, your audience wants to help, especially if they were engaged in your entire speech. So, you know what? Racism, hey, next time, please don't make judgments. Don't do any of this. And the audience says, oh, okay, we get it. We understand. We'll see if we can help you. So it's a call to action from the audience. Number 11. Does this trophy make me look fat? Doesn't matter. I've got the trophy. I don't care how I look. But before the contest, I cared how I looked. And this, unfortunately, is probably one of the things that I want to disagree with the most, because it really shouldn't matter what I'm wearing or how I look. If my hair is brushed, if I have makeup, if my shoes are shined, none of that should matter. However, because the judges are human and not artificial, they will be able to score you and probably either give you a point more than you deserve because of your appearance, if you're sharp dressed, look pressed, look good, or they may even deduct if they don't feel you are dressed to their standards. So that's the hard one. I was lucky enough to have 2 people that cared about me and looked at me and said, you're not wearing that. Not for competition. You're not wearing that. And I'm like, what's wrong with it? Nope, you're not wearing it. So we actually had a session the night before I was going to get on the plane to fly to Anaheim. I was up till 3 in the morning and they were throwing clothes at me. And okay, what about this? And what about that? So it does matter how you look. Unfortunately, appearance does matter. So remember that whenever you're going to give a speech, or if you're competing, or if you're presenting in any form of the matter. Number 12, props. For those of you that were around when, which I think was 6 years ago, they discontinued the legacy program. We had 2 manuals, I mean, tangible in your hand manuals. And you were able to go ahead and knock off the 10 different speeches in one of those manuals that allowed you to create a better speech. One of them was on vocal variety. Another was on special effects or slideshows, presentations. And then another one was also on props and how to use them. I think if you have props, one, they shouldn't really overtake your speech. They should be small in nature. I remember when I gave my speech at the semifinals and I was using drumsticks. And I thought, okay, well, if I'm using drumsticks and I'm tapping on them, I believe my audience is intelligent to realize I'm playing drums. Somebody said, you should go out there with a bass drum. And I thought, well, why would I do that? To me, a bass drum, the biggest drum, is going to take away from the speech. So if you're going to use props, try to keep them to a minimal size. And if you do, don't let the prop overtake the speech. It should add to the speech, not take away from the speech. So if you're going to use props, small, minimal, not too many, don't overdo it. Good luck with that. Now, let me also say this. There was a gentleman back in, I think, the year 2002 that was doing a slideshow presentation. It was hilarious because his wife had gone off to get a job. He was a stay-at-home dad, and the child was maybe 18 months old. He wound up showing slides, and it was probably about 30 different slides of how he used duct tape to hold the baby's bottle up so he wouldn't have to hold it up, to duct tape the baby to the chair, the baby chair. I mean, he duct taped the spoon to the baby's hand. It was hilarious. The pictures were amazing, incredible. However, what would have happened if he would have had that slideshow on a USB or a device and then it didn't work? His whole speech would have been no good. So again, keep your props minimal. Make sure that even if you're not able to, you would be able to do the speech without the props, because it would be sad that if you planned everything around the props and they don't work, then what do you do? Number 13. Oh, I love this one. Because of the beauty of Zoom, we now have the ability to travel all around the world any time of the day or night. I guarantee you, you could probably find a Toastmaster meeting to join. So you've got this speech, you've got it written, and now what you want to do is present to as many clubs as you can, because you want the feedback. You want to get better. You want to know if your club, if your audience is actually accepting what you're saying, or if they have any problems with your speech. I was lucky to have a lady, an Asian lady that was in our club back 5 years ago. And when I gave my speech, everybody was like, wow, Luisa, that was great. It's fantastic. And she raised her hand. She said, I don't understand what you're saying. Wait, what do you mean you don't understand what you're saying? She said, why did you say this? Why did you say this? And why did you do this? And I thought, well, because the guy's a Mexican and because I'm a, she said, I don't know that. And it totally opened up my eyes to realize that I wasn't thinking globally. And now we almost have, in almost everything we do, it almost has to be a global outlook. That way, we don't leave anybody out and everybody gets our point. It would be, to me, frustrating and sad if we worked on something, put the project out there, and only a third of your audience gets what you're talking about. So go visit as many clubs as you can. Try and get feedback from everybody that you can. And I think I talk about it later, to where somebody can say, you know what, Luisa, I didn't like what you said. And that's okay. You have to have tough, thick skin when you're going to be giving a speech, because people are going to come at you and tell you all kinds of things. Now, here's the thing. Half of it might not even be related to what you're doing or saying. They just don't like you. So they're going to say what they want to say. Your family, friends, oh, great job. You were awesome. I loved it. You want to find that one comment from that one evaluator that's really going to give you a good tip. And here's the thing, again, being authentic.
You asked him, and you told
him. You told me to go on this way.
Excuse me? I'm sorry. So you're going to want to ask that one person that's giving you a comment, said, okay, why did he say that? Why did he say what he said? If in the end you don't agree with him, guess what? Keep it. Keep it in your speech. Everybody told me, don't use the line about God in your speech. But what did I do? I kept it. Why? Because if it was going to hold me back from winning, I'll just try again next year. And that's kind of the attitude I had. Luckily, it worked. Luckily, I won, and so I don't have to do this again. But when someone gives you a comment or a critique, take it at face value. Ask yourself, why did they say this? Does it relate? Can I use this? And then you make the ultimate decision on whether you want to keep that or not. Number 14, I've already spoke about, it's keep your speech at 6 minutes, because you never know when something's going to happen where if you've interjected humor, they're going to laugh longer than you think they would have thought they would have laughed. And there can always be that one time, which happened to me once, where I got on stage, I knew what I was supposed to say, and then I lost my train of thought. So I start speaking, trying to make up for catching my place back in my speech, and I took about 15 extra seconds. Had I cut my speech down to just 7 minutes, that would have been a little scary, because I would have had myself right on the time of being almost disqualified. So if you can, cut your speech down to 6 minutes, and you should be good. Number 15, eye contact, hand gestures, voice inflections. And this is, by all means, I do not want to offend anyone here, but if English is not your first language, please present your speech to other clubs, because you might be thinking you are enunciating and pronouncing every word. And in essence, people, because of an accent you may have, people will not be able to understand what you're saying. And you've lost the whole reason for giving a speech, because you can have an amazing speech. I had some friends that were members of one of the clubs, and I went up to one of the gentlemen that had just given him an amazing speech, but he had a very thick accent. And I told him, I said, I would love to work with you on what you're saying and how you're saying it. And he said, of course. And that's what was so beautiful, is when someone gives you the ability or the actual, oh my gosh, what's the word I'm thinking? The actual reason to want to give you an evaluation or a critique, 9 times out of 10, that person wants to help you. They're not being cruel. They just want you to be better. So I helped this gentleman, and we realized at the end of everything that it wasn't so much his pronunciation of it, but he was inflicting the hard syllable, the hard accent on the wrong syllable. For an example, he would say kitchen, and it was kitchen. So he was putting the accent on the wrong syllable. So after we went back and tweaked that, the speech was amazing. And all it took was that little tweak of, are you enunciating? Are you pronouncing the word right? What I started to do was I grabbed my phone. I would hit that little record button when I would text message, and I would say, well, for tomorrow, and my iPhone wrote FIR, tomorrow. And I went, fur? I didn't say fur. Oh, wait a minute. I did say fur. I meant to say for tomorrow. So I use my phone a lot when it comes to correcting my grammar, my enunciation. One thing I've noticed to do, and I'm going to apologize about it right now. I am not going to be the best world championship speaker. I'm already saying this because you know what I do? I say, I'm gonna go to the store. Gonna? Really, Luisa? It's going to. Or I want to be the best speaker. Wanna? Are you serious? So now when I'm texting my friends, that shows up and I go, ooh, I need to change that. So again, enunciation and pronunciation is so important. So that was that one. Probably spent too much time on that. Oh, I love it. Here we come. Number 16. You go, you write the speech. It's perfect. You execute it beautifully. Everybody tells you, great job. And guess what? At that contest, you don't win. You don't even place. So what do? What I told myself, because people came up to me and told me, you should have won. And I tell them, you should have been a judge. But I went home with no trophy. And I realized that when I finally won in 2019, it wasn't, and please hear me when I say this. I am no better a speaker or a contestant than any one of you. I just did 4 things. I said the right thing on the right day to the right judges at the right time. That's it. I said the right thing on the right day to the right judges at the right time. And when I say, if I can do it, you can do it, believe me, it's true. So don't think that I'm any better than any one of you. Any one of you has the power and ability to do what I did. Believe me. Number 17. You go, you compete, you don't win, you pick yourself up, dust yourself off, go home, and prepare to reinvent yourself all over again. That's all it is. This is a contest. It has really almost no reflection on you. It was just, when have you ever seen something like America's Got Talent or The Voice or the Miss America contest or the Miss Universe? And clearly you're like, Miss Costa Rica should have won. And she doesn't. She doesn't even place. It's the same thing. It's a contest. You're rolling the dice. You're hoping you win. But if you don't, go home, dust yourself off, reinvent yourself, and try again. Almost last and not least, number 18 is you've lost the contest. You didn't give a good speech. Go back to number 1. Why are you doing this? Are you doing this because it's something you want to? Are you doing this because it's something you want to prove to someone else? Are you doing this for yourself? Because that's when you make the decision on how serious you're going to be about this. And believe it or not, this is for anything that you tackle in life. It's about losing weight. How serious are you about losing weight? Apparently, I'm not that serious because I'm still overweight. But hey, how serious are you about that new job or about your relationship or about your kids or about your marriage? This is with everything. You always have to ask yourself, how serious am I about this? How much time and dedication do I want to put into this? I'm hoping that by me sharing this, and I want everyone to realize this is my analogy. Some people say, well, you made it to the top. When somebody says you've made it to the top, we envision a mountain. And there's only room for one person to stand on top of that mountain. I don't like the way that sounds, and I don't like the way that looks. So for me, when somebody says I made it to the top, I made it to the top of the plateau on the mountain. I made it to the top of the plateau. And guess what? There is room for everyone on top of that plateau. And if you need help getting up to that plateau, I'm here to help you. because to me, it's not so much a competition, and there can only be one person. We can all succeed. We can all make it up. And if I'm able to help you up, great. And if I need help getting up, hopefully there'll be people helping me get up to that. So realize that the top of the mountain to me is a plateau where there's room for everyone and everyone is welcome. So back to me being me. You know what? Who cares if I didn't win that singing contest? I gotta be me. I gotta be me. Back to you, Mr. Toastmaster.
Thank you, Madam Keynote Speaker. Thanks, Luisa, for a great, enlightening, and educational, and entertaining speech. Everyone, unmute yourselves and give her a round of applause, or give us the emoji, okay?
That was amazing.
Very
Amazing.
good.
That was really
Good
good.
job, Luisa.
Thank you.
Excellent speech.
You should have won in 2019. I was there.
All right.
Awesome.
Never.
Awesome.
I'm so glad you got redeemed.
Thank you. Thank you. Me too.
Now we're going to segue into the Q&A portion of this keynote. But before I do that, I think Luisa said she is a lover of dogs and rescued thousands of dogs. If you can find the reaction that lets you choose your emoji, I want you to give Luisa a kind of a sample of how much you love dogs also. So find a dog emoji and show that in your reaction, okay?
Thank you. Thank you.
Click on the react button, click on the three dots and find the
Oh,
dog.
there's the little puppy
icon.
faces. I like it. Who is that?
Kind of like this right
Valerie.
here. There you go. Thanks, Lizette.
Awesome,
Good
awesome.
job. Yeah, find that reaction or put it in the chat window as well.
Thank you so much. Oh, Julian, before I forget, if I could get a copy of the questions on the chats or the comments, I would love that.
Absolutely. We'll definitely do that
Awesome,
for
awesome.
you.
I'm not able to go back and read them as fast as they come up sometimes. Ah, the little doggy face. Thank you.
That is
Yay.
amazing. That is amazing. Great job. And thank you for definitely giving your all to some very authentic creatures, the dogs. They definitely are great assets to us in our lives and keeping us grounded. So thank you for your work on that, Luisa. And great to get
Absolutely.
that speech.
Thank you for acknowledging that. I appreciate it.
No problem. All right. So again, we have a Q&A session to kind of round out and make a call to action to be more engaged. I see that we have all 18 tips in the chat window. Feel free to
Awesome.
unmute yourselves. Feel free to pose your question in the chat window. Any questions for our keynote speaker? This is our 2024 World Champion Public Speaking. So this is a very unique opportunity to kind of pick her brain and see, just how you can call from her advice and her knowledge to make yourself a better, more authentic communicator and leader. So any questions? Who wants to go
There is
first?
something I would like to throw in, if I may, Julian, and I don't believe I touched on it. It's somebody asked me how to have an impactful speech. And to me, it's going to be you talking about the most embarrassing or personal event in your life and sharing that with your audience, because the more you're able to be vulnerable to your audience, people have heard all different kinds of speeches, but when you're able to draw them in with showing your true self, to me, that's the key for writing a great speech. In my final speech, I can't believe I admitted it, because my father would say that quitters cry, or babies cry, or sissies cry. My father had that mindset. So for me to be able to admit in my speech that I started crying, that was probably one of the things I never would want to admit to anyone. But it makes you more authentic and human when you are able to share things with things with your audience that you wouldn't want anyone to know. So I forgot to touch on that, but thank you for allowing me to tell you that. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Definitely. Vulnerability equals relatability. It's very important to be vulnerable and share with yourself so that your audience can relate to you and that your message is resonating. So definitely great tip. Thank you again, Luisa.
Oh, thank you.
So I see quite a few hands raised. Let's start with, wow, where do I start first? Let's start with, okay, let's start with Valerie Smith, our PQD. I see your hand raised. What's your question?
Yeah, so I know that I was following you when you were doing your tips, but number 6, it wasn't clear if that was talking about having a strong conclusion. If you can let us know what
Oh,
number.
similar intro to ending. So my intro today was me singing I Gotta Be Me. So my ending was also me singing. So you see, it was the same intro and the ending. They're both relatable. If you go back to when I speak my speeches, back to 2019, the semis, I started with the word stop, and then I ended the speech with the word go. So it's, to me, if your intro relates to your ending, it kind of tells the audience, okay, she's finished with the speech. For my finals, I started with clear, and I ended the speech with, am I clear? Clear. So something like that, relatable, intro to ending, relatable.
Okay, thank you.
I hope that answered your question.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, a little doggy face.
Next, we have a question from Arjan in the chat window. Arjan asks, how would you practice vocal variety? Luisa, how would you practice vocal variety?
Allow me to share that my best friend had her 6-year-old son, and my nephew was 6 years old. And for Christmas, I bought them both a little skateboard from Walmart. And my best friend's son took that skateboard and tore it up and was amazing. And my 6-year-old nephew couldn't even stand on it for 2 seconds. So the way I practice vocal variety is, I feel I've always been an entertainer. So when I start to tell a story, this could be a dinner with friends, this could be us hanging out anywhere, like, oh my gosh, you guys, I got to tell you about this. And the one way to practice vocal variety is to speak about something that you're passionate about. If you're passionate about crocheting, it's going to show and it's going to sound in your voice because you're excited about it. To be able to practice vocal variety, that's a tough question for me to answer, because I feel for me that comes naturally because I get excited about almost anything. So if you're going to want to practice vocal variety, please make sure that whatever you're talking about, if you have the opportunity, is something you're going to get excited about, because your vocal variety will shine through without you even having to practice. How to practice for it? I don't even know if I have an answer for that, because I don't know how to do it. Sorry.
No, that's okay. It's a very authentic answer. Thank you for that, Luisa. But as we know, vocal variety is one of the key elements in a Toastmasters speech. So guess what? If you go to a Toastmasters club meeting, you will learn all about how to enhance and hone in on that vocal variety. Thank you, Ajahn, for that question. I'm seeing a lot more questions coming through, but I also see a hand raised by Melody. So Melody, please unmute and share with us your question.
Hello, thank you, Julian. Hello, Luisa. Thank you for all your tips. I love I like participating in contests. And I'm wondering, how did you stay motivated 2 years in a row, as well as balance your life? Because when I am in contests, I feel guilty if I'm not practicing my speech. If I want to sit and watch TV or something, then I feel, oh, I should be practicing. I shouldn't be watching TV. How did you manage that for like how many years you did it for?
It was actually for 5 years,
Oh,
but it's, again, question number 1, why are you doing this? I was doing it because I wanted to make my mom proud. And 6 weeks before the contest in Anaheim in August, she passed away. It's something I've always wanted to do my entire life. Whatever I did, I was so competitive, but she was so competitive that I think she instilled that in me, or passed that on down to me, because we would, I'd call her up and I'd say, hey mom, what are you doing? She goes, well, I'm getting ready to mow my yard. I said, oh, you know what? I was gonna mow my yard too. And she would say, I bet I finished before you do. And she would hang up. And so I'd run out and grab the lawnmower and start mowing the yard. And I would finish. And I'm like, oh yes, I finished before she did. And we lived 2 blocks away from each other. So I'd go and I'd be putting my lawnmower up, and she'd be walking up the driveway like, I finished before you did. And So I've been competitive since I can remember, and all I really wanted to do, because she was such an eloquent speaker. I'm so glad I never had to compete against her, because I never would have won. But she was amazing, and I was just trying to make my mom proud, and that's what kept me going. There's a reason why you do what you do, and I knew what my reason was, so I was very focused in it. And funny that you say, oh, I'm sitting watching TV and I should be practicing my speech. I'll have you know that after I won in Anaheim, I'm on the flight going home, and I'm thinking, I need to practice my speech. And I went, oh, wait a minute, the contest is over. But that's how focused I was, because every extra minute or moment that I had, I was practicing my speech. And sometimes I'll still catch myself practicing it. But yeah, great question. Ask yourself why you're doing it, and how much time and devotion you're willing to put into it. There's your answer.
This to you. I had an amazing mommy as well, so I understand about that. Thanks for sharing.
Thank you.
Thank you, Melody. All right, I see a hand raised and a question in the chat window from Amy. Amy, what's your question, please? Please unmute yourself.
We can't hear you.
Yes, thank you. Hi, Luisa. It's Amy.
Hello, Amy.
I was wondering, you're talking about utilizing your phone. Did that happen more after your accident? Did you utilize your phone for things? No, before that?
Oh yes. Yeah, I've been since I've had an iPhone, I'm always trying to figure out what the gadgets are. So I find the nearest 6-year-old to explain everything to me. And that usually works. And I said, what is this? I said, oh, if you want to say something, you just hit that little microphone button down there. And so I started using that. And when I started using that, that's when I realized how poor my enunciation was. And I thought it was pretty good. But after I started using my iPhone, yes. No, the accident did not stop me. Luckily, there was from what I can tell, no brain injury, but everything that I was doing before, I kept doing it. I didn't want to have to use my wheelchair on stage for the finals, but the night before I had a little accident and my knee had kind of doubled up under the wheelchair. So I wasn't able to stand for as long as I had wanted to. I am making progress on it, but no, the accident did not hinder my ability to give a speech or think or anything like that. Great question, but no. I've been using my iPhone probably for the last 7 or 8 years on trying to improve my diction.
Great. I remember, just real quick, I remember going to your club before I went down there, and I noticed, I think you were doing a grammarian role or evaluation, and you blew me away. I was like, oh my gosh, I have to meet that gal. Just in watching you do that part. But thank you.
Oh, awesome. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you for your question, Amy. And, we do have a lot more questions coming through. We do want to be mindful of our time, but I think we can kind of get these questions in. Next, we have a question from Kathleen. Kathleen, please unmute and share with us your question.
Hello. I'm actually kind of a new Toastmaster for about a year, maybe a year and a half or so. So I thought that was really amazing and very inspiring, and very happy to be at the TLI today. My question was, I think I was a little bit confused. You had a moment where you talked about how if you wrote a speech for everyone, you're also giving it to no one. But then in the beginning, you talked about how, well, you need to be able to be broad enough to relate to everybody. So how is that different? Or it seemed contradictory, so I wanted to know what the differences were.
Okay, so you want to take that relatable issue, racism, illness, overcoming, grief, happiness, anything, and make that relatable to your entire audience. However, if you're going to try to please everyone, you please no one, because you aren't being specific with your ideas. My example, again, is the part about my God. Everybody said, leave it out. I left it in. But then I excused myself by saying, This is my God I'm talking about. I'm not talking about your God. I'm not talking about Krishna or Buddha or anything. So you have to you don't have to. If you want to have a successful, there you go. If you want to have a successful speech that resonates with your audience, make it on a general topic. However, be specific in what you want to say. Hope that answered that question.
Yes, thank you so much.
Great. Thank you, Kathleen. Next, we have a question in the chat from Daphne. She says, what you said about story versus a report was interesting. I'd like to pack a lot of info in a speech or teach something, even when there's a story. Is there a limit to how many new concepts you should present? What are your thoughts on that?
New concept, depending on how impactful your speech is. Let's say you're as a business meeting and you've got to cover 10 different new things that the CEO says, hey, we need our sales team to be working on this. With that, I would say maybe every third or fourth one, you're going to want to throw in a 20 to 30 second personal story to keep. This does two things. It keeps your audience wanting to listen to you, and then you're able to see their reaction. Like, are they listening to me, or are they really, do they have their earbuds on and they're listening to a song instead of me? So you gauge your audience's reaction to that. You don't want to throw too much, and you don't want to throw too many personal stories. If it's like a speech for competition where it's 5 to 7, you usually have the meat of it is usually your personal story. And from there, from your intro, you go into your personal, and then from personal, you go out to your exit, wrap it up, call the action, and then you're finished. But if it's something else, like if it's a 30 or 40-minute speech, you're going to want to, I don't know if you noticed when I was giving, this was a 35-minute speech that I gave, I threw in a few little stories just to keep you entertained and to keep you engaged. So don't throw out too many, make them nice and short, to the point, and keep going. And I hope that answered your question.
Great. Thank you, Daphne. I'm looking in the chat window and I'm seeing just about every species of dog you can imagine, Luisa. So we have a lot of dog people in the Zoom room today. So thank you for sharing that with her. All right, another question from Angela Owens. Angela, what is your question, please? Angela, are you unmuted?
Okay, that will help. Sorry. Thank you, Luisa, for sharing all these tips, especially surrounding the audience. And that's one of the questions that I have regarding, I guess you could say, audience control, getting the audience back. So I've seen situations, and I've been in them, where the audience is laughing and just trying to get them back on track. Or even when you lose the audience, you know, people may kind of doze off, or not the whole group, but a few people, you're like, man, I need to get the audience back engaged. So any advice you have on those two areas with the audience?
Absolutely. And this is going to be probably something that a lot of people will want to do, because it shows that you are at fault as a speaker, because I've given a joke and nobody laughed. And I'll pretend to take a piece of paper out and say, didn't work, mom was right, don't use that joke again. And I'll act like I'm putting the paper back in my pocket, and then the audience laughs. But what you actually did was tell the audience, I made a mistake, but hey, I'm trying to get you back. Or if the audience isn't engaging, you can stop in the middle and say, okay, come on, guys. What's it going to take to get you all involved? Do we need to get up and do the hokey pokey? What's it going to take? Work with me, guys. So right there, what you're doing is you're telling your audience, hey, what I'm doing isn't working. Maybe I'm not as good a speaker as I thought I was. What's it going to take for you guys to join me? And that, to me, is being very, very vulnerable. And you're telling the audience, I'm not a good speaker because what I thought was supposed to happen is not happening. So anytime you can be raw and honest with the audience, and they'll love you for it. That's the hilarious part about it, is they're going to accept you even more. And now they're going to want to listen to you.
Gotcha. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Angela. Next, we have a question from Juan. Juan, what's your question?
Yeah, thank you, Julian. Hey, Luisa, fantastic speech. I love your sense of humor. It comes very naturally, and I was just laughing the entire time, really. I'm not exaggerating. My question to you is there something that you do on a daily basis to develop this sense of humor, or class, improv, anything like that that you do, or is it just a natural personality trait?
I don't do any improv. I don't think it's natural. What I think it was my brother, sister, father, mother, and I we were a vaudeville act from the minute we woke up to the minute we went to sleep. We were trying to outdo each other's jokes. Nobody can make me laugh like my brother, because we were at my father's funeral, and he had me cracking up the whole time, where my brother and I got in trouble with my mother. You know, here we are. I was 50, my brother was 55 years old, and we're looking at each other like we're kids in church and about to get in trouble. And to me, I was just raised in the most perfect, harmonious family that just, we could have had a sitcom. And so I don't know if I had been raised in a different environment, if I would still have this sense of humor that I have. But I'm going to give all credit to the family unit, especially my dad was wicked and fierce with his cutbacks, and my mother was the enduring and loving and kind person, also with great feedback. So I feel I'm half my father and half my mother. And man, do I want to use my dad's side of me more. But I think, okay, would my mom want me acting like this? So I try to restrain myself. But natural, I'm gonna give all credit to my family unit. Yep. Great question. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Juan. And FYI, folks, this is for our guests and for our newer Toastmasters, we have a great learning environment called Pathways. And there is a path in Pathways that will help you hone in on your humor. It's called the Engaging Humor Path. I'm on level 5 myself. It is a great way to further make yourself relatable and to connect with your audience by using the gift of humor. So thank you for that answer, Luisa, and definitely look to the Engaging Humor Path and Pathways. All right, next question from Carol. Carol, what's your question for Luisa?
Luisa, you mentioned that, well, I'm wondering, we're just coming up on contest time, and I'm wondering if you shared your speech with several different clubs before you went further into the contest, and did you incorporate some of the feedback you received from the clubs? I'm just wondering, how many clubs did you share your story with? How many times did you alter your speech before you got it to perfection?
Let me answer that last part first. How many times did I alter it? The day of competition in Anaheim on Saturday at 7 a.m., I was considering using an entirely different speech because I wasn't as confident as I thought I should be. But then I tried to do the same thing back in 2019. So I guess I just don't have enough confidence in myself that the speech is good. But I alter it as I go, thinking, and I weigh it again. Be authentic and true to yourself, because if somebody tells you to leave something out and they give you a valid point, because I always ask them, wait, why did you say that? Instead of, our first reaction is to be upset when somebody says, well, your speech wasn't any good. Well, then you know what? Well, then you shouldn't have listened. That would have been my dad's reaction and my dad's comment. But my concern is I want to get better. So tell me what it is that you didn't like or didn't understand, because I want to improve. Now, if they say, well, you know what, you shouldn't have worn the scarf to the meeting. Well, you know what? That has nothing to do with the speech. So I don't even give that credit. But sometimes, every now and then, somebody will say something, and I'll be driving home or something. I'll say, okay, why did they say that? Why did they say that? Because I'm just now realizing that 100%, 99% of my speech is geared straight to the audience. It's not about me. And that's the hardest thing that a lot of people, I think, realize when they're separating themselves from giving a speech. You're not there to impress yourself or sound good. You are there to get your audience going. So I change my speech all the time. I stay true to myself and authentic to myself. And I hope that answered the question. I know that was the first part. The second part, can't remember what the first part was.
I was wondering how many clubs you shared it with before you got.
Yes. Okay, so we have 5 clubs here in our area. but I
Okay.
did go on Zoom a few times. However, I will be honest with you, my last speech, I didn't share it with anyone on Zoom because I'm a little weird and protective that was my finals speech. And I didn't
Right.
want anybody to see it until I was ready to give it. But my semifinals, I went everywhere and anywhere with that because that didn't matter.
And the other speech, someone said that you should have won in 2019, I think. Is it the same speech or so that was a totally different speech?
Okay, so for those of you that don't know, and if you're going to enter into this contest, you used to have 3 different speeches. But what you do, and no, now Toastmasters will not allow you to use the same speech again once you've used it at the district level. So there's club, area, division, district, region, semifinal, final, and then from there you either place or you don't. Up to the semifinal speech, you can use your same speech, which the drumsticks one, I used that club, area, division, district, region. They took the video of my district and they said, you're going on to semi. At semifinal in Anaheim, I used that speech. But then when you go to finals, you have to have a completely different speech. And what people don't realize is we are all using our best speech at the semifinals. So
Right.
when you see people giving a speech at the finals and you think, well, that speech wasn't that good. No, it wasn't. Why? Because we used our best speech at semis so we could make it to the final stage. You're not like, oh, I'm going to use my second or third best and hope I make it to finals. No, you go all out, guns blazing. That's why everybody wants to go to the semifinals because that's where you hear most of the best speeches. So you have to have at least 2 speeches ready to go. Hope that answered your question.
It does. Thanks so much.
Great. Thank you, Carol. Okay, we will put a close on the Q&A session, but I want to thank Luisa again for a very engaging and very personal and very pivotal and profound speech today, keynote speech. Let's give her a round of applause one more time, folks.
Thank you. Thank you again, Julian, for, you know what, I'm going to admit it. I'm terrible at responding to the emails and the text messages and all that. So thank you so much for your patience and for actually getting me here. I appreciate that.
My pleasure. Thank you again for a great speech. I'm so glad you're able to make it and share with us your words of wisdom.